Before starting today's program, please turn to Unit 7 in your guide and complete Exercise 1.
Do you think our actions are governed by chance? Or is there something or a group of things that leads us towards certain actions and makes us avoid others? Actions form the foundations for personality. In the same way, many people believe that motivation, in all its various forms, is the basis of behavior. When you consider that motivation also fosters the concept of manipulation, the possibilities can become frightening. But only the insecure part of us balks at the idea of manipulating people to get what we want. When our aggressive side takes charge, when we want to effect a change for our benefit, we automatically become motivators, not manipulators. Why did he say that? How can I get her to change her mind? What can I say or do to win his support? The reasons people act the way they do depend on a complex and intertwining series of relationships. The supervisor who really wants to be effective is always searching for keys to unlock the secrets of employee motivation. You already have some basic ideas about human behavior, and in this session we're going to examine some ideas about the concept of motivation. One of the supervisor's primary jobs is encouraging workers to become achievers. Unfortunately, this problem isn't easy to solve, and an approach that's successful in one particular work situation may fall flat on its face in another. Always be ready and able to adapt your behavior according to the personalities and demands involved in each work situation. As Mark Twain once remarked, a round man cannot be expected to fit into a square hole right away. He must have time to modify his shape.
One of the most common complaints of many supervisors is that their employees simply are not motivated. This sad lament usually follows, "We just don't get workers like we used to." What happened to all the great employees of the good old days? Think about what we mean when we say employees of the good old days. What characteristics describe a motivated employee to you?
Now we're going to cover some of the most popular approaches to motivation. As I describe each one, I hope you'll be thinking about yourself and how these approaches relate to what motivates you. The first is the classical approach. Money is clearly considered the best motivator in the classical approach to motivation. This approach assumes that workers act in whatever manner brings them the greatest financial reward. Many people agree with this approach, but its validity has never really been clearly determined. While every person may have a price, the price of some people may be measured in something other than just money. Money is certainly a good motivator. Nobody's going to deny that. And it's usually a good one. But the classical approach fails to take into account other factors that affect an individual worker's motivation besides just money. Which brings us to the next approach, the human needs approach, which is best illustrated by Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once our physical needs for air, water, food, shelter, and clothing are satisfied, we seek security as well as physical safety. Then social needs for companionship and acceptance are the next to be fulfilled. After we've been accepted by a group, we try to gain their respect by developing our talents in a manner useful to and appreciated by the group. The highest level of our needs, self-actualization, can never be completely fulfilled because probably no one ever develops abilities to their fullest capacity. Now, even if you're reluctant to accept all aspects of this approach, you have to admit that there are different levels of needs among your workers. The same goes for everyone. As a wise supervisor, you study your people to find out their needs. Then you employ different techniques of motivation according to the need of individual workers. Some people feel the top three levels of the human needs approach exert the greatest influence in modern motivation at work today. The emphasis in the human relations approach is social, esteem, and self-actualization needs. This approach assumes that in our society, the physical and safety needs are pretty much met for the vast majority of people. It concentrates instead on the fulfillment of higher level needs. Supervisors are encouraged to use many techniques and methods to motivate their workers, including incentive plans, individual awards, special recognition ceremonies, as well as the desire to be creative. The supervisor who follows the human relations approach encourages workers' participation in decision-making and allows them the use to use their creative and leadership abilities to work toward common goals. The supervisor who uses this approach thinks more of the workers than the classical approach supervisor. Classical approach supervision techniques assume a worker can't handle anything but a simple, uncomplicated job assignment. Human relations techniques, however, attempt to make the worker a part of the team. If a person feels like a significant member of the group, the highest form of motivation is at work. The next approach is more an explanation of behavior and motivation than really what we would call a concrete plan. It's called the preference expectation approach. Now, we know that numerous possible outcomes can result from a single activity from an individual. In each case, the worker has a preference for a particular outcome or motivator. For instance, if a worker speeds up production and makes more pieces of whatever he's making, several things could result: a raise, a bonus, a trophy, a certificate, or even a promotion. On the other hand, this could make co-workers somewhat jealous, and the worker might be avoided by the other members of the work group. Perhaps nothing would happen. That wasn't anticipated. The only certainty is that the worker will have definite ideas about his or her preferred outcome from the behavior. After preference must come expectation. Despite likes and dislikes, unless the worker has an expectation that desired outcomes are at least possible, preference won't affect performance much. No matter how much preference there is for a bonus, increased production isn't likely if no bonuses have ever been awarded in the company. There has to be some reasonable expectation that the reward will come in order for the employee to feel or be motivated. The last approach we want to talk about is a two-factor approach developed by Frederick Herzberg called the maintenance and motivation approach to motivation. Now, according to Herzberg, the first factor involved in any job situation is made up of maintenance characteristics: the necessities of adequate compensation, working conditions, job safety and security, fringe benefits, and so forth. Now, these characteristics have to be present before the worker can even begin to be motivated. By the way, he also calls these dissatisfiers, meaning that if these factors aren't at least adequate, employees will be very dissatisfied. Note that these factors are not motivators. Number one, company policy and administration. 2, technical supervision. 3, interpersonal relations with the supervisor. 4, interpersonal relations with peers. 5, interpersonal relations with subordinates. 6, salary. 7, job security. 8, personal life. 9, working conditions. And 10, status. The second of Herzberg's factors consists of motivational characteristics. Once maintenance needs are satisfied, the following 6 factors become very critical in developing worker motivation and dedication to the work. They are also called satisfiers or motivators. These 6 motivators are the following. Number 1, the opportunity for achievement. Number 2, recognition. Number 3, the opportunity for advancement. Number 4, the work itself. Number 5, the possibility of personal growth on the job. And number 6, responsibility. It should be obvious from this list that what really motivates a worker involves the job itself and not just peripheral matters. The real message of Herzberg's two-factor approach is this: if you want to motivate your worker, don't give the worker a new coat of paint each year, but give the worker a bigger share of the job itself. Now check this out on yourself. If you as a supervisor are totally involved in trying to solve a particular problem, or you're using your creative abilities to their very fullest, are you likely to notice whether or not your office floor is carpeted? This may create dissatisfaction if the job isn't challenging, but office decor won't make us put out that extra effort day after day. Opportunities for meaningful achievement can override many physical disadvantages in the work situation. That's one of the prime keys to motivation of your employees, and one of the greatest challenges in supervision.
Developing a motivated work team takes a lot of patience, skill, and knowledge about what goes on in the heads and hearts of employees. One of the most effective things we can do as supervisors and managers is to put ourselves in the shoes of subordinates to be able to understand why they're performing as they are. Let's listen in as one of our supervisors discusses an employee motivation problem with his boss.
Honest, Frank, I'm getting to the end of my rope with these people. It's disgraceful. They don't seem to take pride in their work anymore. They don't care.
I don't know what makes you say that. Your staff is certainly well qualified, and the potential is there to do a good job.
I wish you could see firsthand the lab reports are turning in. I mean, I'm checking them every day, and every day there's mistakes. And the paperwork looks like chickens walk on it. They just don't seem to have the motivation to do their jobs right.
From your description, it sounds pretty bad. It's not like the group of professionals I know.
Yeah, and they're slow, too. They can't wait till the end of the day to pack things up and slip out a little early. I really want to help, but I don't know where to start to light a fire under these people.
Well, I haven't heard or seen anything unusual from them. And, but you know, come to think of it, your staff hasn't been too friendly when I run into them.
Well, that could be. I guess the only time I really talk to them is, when I'm going over mistakes they've made.
So you haven't had time to set them down and let them know what's bugging you?
Time? My time's spent in meetings or filling out paperwork or going over those procedures and checking the procedures out. It's taken more time than I thought it would.
Do you think their pay might be an issue? I mean, nobody's been very happy with these budget cuts and salary-saving efforts this year.
No, I don't really think so. There was a little flack initially, but after a week or so, that all settled down.
Well, tell me, what other new things have you tried? You know, things to sort of get them back on track.
Well, like I said, I sit them down when there's a mistake, and I point it out to them.
And that hasn't worked?
Hey, not that I can tell. They don't care.
Well, your job now is to get that turned around. You say you hadn't had time to talk to them about this. Do you think it'll work?
Well, we could give it a try, I suppose. I really don't think it's going to help to get all of them to sit down for a little pep talk.
Pep talk? Pep talk is not what I had in mind. Let them do the talking. Then maybe you can find out what's bugging them.
I'm not sure they'd talk to me. And even if they would, I don't think they know what's bugging them.
Well, that could be right. But we'll never know until you try. Look, you think about it and you make a decision and let me know real soon. If things are as difficult as you say, they could get worse. And I don't want to see you lose any staff. With the budget cuts being what they are, it could be some time before we could rehire again.
Now you got me worried. I mean, with even one staff member down, that'd put a real strain on the rest of the people. I don't know what we'll do with the vacations coming up and all. I guess this would be the wrong time to ask people to postpone vacations.
Now, that's thinking. That's real perceptive. Look, keep me posted on your progress. And remember, I'm with you on this.
Thanks, Frank.
Action.
Marvin has quite a challenge ahead of him as he tries to light a fire under his staff. Do you think Marvin is right when he says that people don't care anymore? Based on what you have learned so far and what you have just heard, examine the following questions. A, what are several factors that could be demotivating Marvin's staff? B, how successful would a meeting be? Predict whether or not you think the employees will be willing to talk about the real issues. C, what changes would you make if you were the supervisor?
Everyone has certain ideas about what does and does not motivate people. These ideas relate to the notions we hold about people in general and to our total outlook on life. Perhaps your approach to supervision agrees perfectly with one of the approaches we've discussed already, or you may have a totally different idea of human nature and motivation. In any case, we use our ideas about people whenever we work towards changing their behavior. Beliefs about the nature of workers and appropriate means of motivating them can be neatly divided into two opposing categories, what we will call Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X supervisors run a tight ship. They maintain close control over workers, believe in centralized authority, and like to make decisions pretty much by themselves. This type of authoritarian supervisor has a certain set of assumptions about people which goes something like this. Theory X supervisors believe that most people dislike work and will avoid it whenever possible. Secondly, they believe that most people have to be forced or threatened by punishment before they will make the effort necessary to accomplish organizational goals. Thirdly, they believe that most people are basically passive and therefore prefer to be directed rather than assume any risk or responsibility. Above all else, they prefer job security. Now, on the other hand, Theory Y supervisors have a very different set of assumptions about people. They usually maintain a looser organizational environment, rely less on coercion and punishment, delegate authority more readily, and allow more democratic participation in decision-making. Theory Y supervisors have the following assumptions about people. Number one, that work is as natural as play or rest and therefore is not avoided. Secondly, self-motivation and inherent satisfaction in work will motivate workers more effectively than coercion. Thirdly, they believe that employee commitment is a crucial factor in motivation, and it is won by rewarding individual effort. Fourthly, Theory Y supervisors believe that given the proper environment, the average individual learns to accept and even seek responsibility. Fifth, many workers have the ability to be creative and innovative in the solution of organizational problems. And sixth, in modern business organizations, human intellectual potential is often ignored and wasted. Now, which approach do you think leads to the best results in your organization? It may be easy to believe that Theory Y always produces the best results since it's more humanistic and less harsh in nature. But don't forget that many businesses have achieved tremendous success under authoritarian leadership. It may be more appropriate for some workers or in certain situations. Workers, like any of us, are not all alike in their drives and needs. Others balk at strict control and prefer to have more responsibility and self-determination in their jobs. A particular work situation may demand a humanistic approach, while another may call for authoritarian Theory X treatment. Even in the same work situation, a supervisor may deal with various workers responding to different types of leadership. Each situation, based on its own merits, must suggest the appropriate supervisory style. By now, you should be able to answer these questions without any hesitation. Is any one approach right all the time? Or should the supervisor be prepared to use different approaches and combinations depending on the situation itself?
Hi, Lynn.
Oh, hi, Marv.
Mind if I sit down?
Oh, please do. Look, I'm really sorry that I didn't get a chance to call you back this morning, but I've just been swamped.
Hey, that's okay. I really wanted a chance to talk with you over lunch anyhow. It's about a problem I've been having with some of the technicians down the lab. They're really not producing the way I think they ought to. Then I got to thinking about some of the comments you made in our supervisors meeting about some things that you did in your department that turned things around only last month. Mm-hmm. And I thought maybe if you could share some of those ideas with me, it might help our guys down the lab.
Well, sure, Marvin. Well, I guess the main thing I did was modify my approach. I'd really been coming down on them pretty hard. You know, sort of like that Theory X thing we've been going over in the supervisory class. Well, that's the only way I really knew how to handle people who weren't performing well, because that's the only way I'd ever seen anybody, any other bosses work. What are you doing with your staff?
Oh, well, I've been bringing them in individually and pointing out their mistakes. But this morning, I had a group meeting. I brought them all in, and I really lowered a boom on them.
Well, what did you say to them?
Well, I listed all the mistakes, pointed them out individually in front of the group. Then I told them I expected better than that of them. I knew they could do better than that. They're just goofing around. I said, okay, clean slate. Tomorrow is a brand new day. No more of that goofing, no more mistakes, and if you don't stop and clean up your act, I'm going to write you up and haul you up for disciplinary action.
Ooh, that's a bit of a hard-lined approach, Marv. How did they take it? I mean, did they have anybody have anything to say?
No, they didn't. I kind of hoped they would. They just all sat there stone-faced, and then when it was over, they just kind of crawled out like guilty little kids.
But they're not kids, Marv. I mean, you've got a staff of really smart professionals. I really think you ought to take a slightly different approach. You know, consult with them a little bit, more like that theory Y we've been studying about. You've obviously been using theory X, and it hasn't been working too well.
Well, sure I've been using that. The hard-nosed approach is all I know. I mean, that's what I do, and it's always worked before with other groups.
Yeah, but was it you had a different staff, it was a different setting, and they expected it of you, you know. As I remember, it sort of seemed to come with the territory. Why don't you ease up on these guys some?
You want me to ease up on these guys? I mean, we have production schedules to fill, and we have time limitations to meet.
Well, it seems to me like you're not going to get anywhere with them until you develop better personal relations. Look, Marv, they need your support. They need to feel that you trust them and that you feel like they're responsible people.
Well, but they haven't given me any reason to trust them or any reason to feel they are responsible.
Well, don't you think you've set that up with your own behavior? I mean, remember that thing about the self-fulfilling prophecy we've studied about? Seems to me that you've been treating them just like you expected them to screw up, and they haven't disappointed you.
Okay, that one hits pretty close to home. Before they dropped me into this slot, they did tell me to look for screw-ups, to look for problems with low productivity, and I've been looking for them ever since I got here.
Well, why don't you just talk to him again? Give him another chance.
You know, it looks like I got some fence mending to do.
Well, it isn't going to be easy, but, you know, I think that's one of the real challenges of supervision. Trying to develop mutual trust and goodwill with the employees. I know it hadn't been easy for me.
How about this? What if I were to bring them in on a one-to-one basis and sit down with them and have a good old-fashioned heart-to-heart talk?
Well, that sounds good to me. Oh, and while you're at it, why don't you give them a pat on the back for the things they've done really well?
You're right. You know, each of them has areas where he does things really well. There's no reason I couldn't do that and get the whole thing working well. And once we're talking and it's opened up, maybe they could give me some insight into that morale problem we've been having down there and maybe offer some constructive suggestions to solving it.
Well, you may have a bit of a problem getting them to level with you and really be honest. Suppose the part of the problem is you, Marv. How are you going to take that?
Well, I suppose if part of the problem's me, I'm just going to have to deal with it. It's not going to be easy.
No, it isn't going to be easy. Believe me, I know. I finally had one of the women in my department come to me and tell me that I was really getting in her hair. I kept coming out of my office and going back to my old job, which is her job now, and thank God she was tactful about it.
I guess the real answer is that I have to make them feel that it's okay to be honest.
You think they're going to take that from a guy who was so hard on them this morning?
Boy, I don't know. I really need this to work. Maybe that's why I'm so anxious.
Well, it sounds to me like you are going to have a group of very interesting meetings.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of which, I'm going to have to run or I'll be late for the auditors meeting. Keep in touch, Marv. Let me know how it all works out, will you?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks for the ideas.
You're welcome.
No doubt about it, it's difficult for someone to change their style and approach to management. But sometimes it's absolutely necessary in order to get the results you want. Marvin is about to embark on a new effort here. Building a feeling of trust and cooperation is a slow process, but an important one, especially when dealing with today's employees. Our people today have ideas, want responsibility, and want to take part in at least some decision-making. Keeping these ideas in mind, it is now time for you to plan the talk Marvin should have with each employee. First, take a few minutes to write down what you would like to cover in your conversation, keeping in mind that you have only recently had a meeting with the entire staff in which you took an entirely different approach. It will be helpful to write down for yourself what you would like to accomplish during the talk.
When everything's going well, workers and supervisor alike ride an upward spiral of success. Every positive happening leads to others, and the health of the company is beyond question. But when morale is low, the spiral drops and is very difficult to correct. When motivational techniques succeed, one result is usually good worker morale. A definition of morale that includes most, if not all, of the other traditional definitions is the following. Morale is the extent to which an individual's needs are satisfied and the extent to which the individual sees this satisfaction as coming from the total job situation. This definition emphasizes the total job situation, which includes 4 relatively independent areas that may either contribute to or detract from job satisfaction. These 4 areas are as follows. Number 1, intrinsic job satisfaction, the worker's satisfaction with the work as such. Number 2, satisfaction with the company, its goals, policies, and procedures. 3, satisfaction with supervision, the personal relationship established between worker and manager. And fourthly, satisfaction with rewards and advancement opportunities. Obviously, the quality of work is affected by employees' attitudes towards the job. Workers caught in jobs they consider to be meaningless don't pay close attention to producing high-quality results. Naturally, we wish all workers would be equally motivated and enjoy a high morale in their jobs. But the morale of a department is largely up to you, the supervisor.
Why should a supervisor care about motivating employees? Here are some comments you would hear from workers who are motivated.
You know, I am really proud of that report we turned out today. We've answered all the questions that anyone could ask.
Sure did.
Well, I'm finished with my batch. Sam, can I help you with yours?
Yeah, Janet, that would be
Okay,
fine.
we'll have it knocked out in no time.
Our production level hit an all-time high this month. Do you think we can beat that level next month?
I know it's quitting time, but I'd like to finish one more section before I leave.
Okay, then I'll see you later.
Bye.
Marvin, I've just worked out a way that we can save a lot of time and cut down on the errors on this procedure.
Looks good, Sam.
Thanks.
We've come to the end of today's program on motivation at work. Since you've no doubt already been thinking about the motivation of your employees and maybe even yourself, it's now time to go to the application exercise for Unit 7.